Yeah, so in the previous class, so we were discussing about three principal functions, okay, of an operating system. One was program management, next was resource management, and the last one is security and protection. Okay, so we shall see in detail about each of the three topics. So first one is program management. So what will come under program management? So the computational structure is a configuration of one or more programs that work towards a common goal. Okay, so some typical computational structures are, that is in program management. This computational structure is very important. Nothing but this computational structure can be, so either at any given point of time in your computer or PC only one program is running, okay, or at any given point of time in your PC or embedded system, so a sequence of single programs are running, that is one after the other, or it might be co-executing programs, okay, or this is also known as concurrent programming. Okay, so it is also known as concurrent programming. So these are the three scenarios that the programs in your system or embedded system can be operating. Okay, so what do you mean by single program? So there is a table here which shows in brief about each of this. Single program means perform program initiation, termination, and resource management. So this is what operating system will do. Since it is single program at any given point of time, okay, so it will take care of that single program by initiating it, okay, whenever the user wants it, and then terminating it once it finishes it, and allot any resources to it if it requires. Okay, so resource management. Next, sequence of single program. So as the name itself indicates here, sequence of single program. So again, it is single programs only, but there is a sequence there. That is, let's say in this sequence there are three programs, 1, 2, and 3. So this is program 1, program 2, and program 3. Since it is sequence, so in this sequence, whichever is in the first or first place, that will execute first. So 1 is there, so program 1 will execute first. After completing program 1, program 2 executes, and then program 3 executes. So this is sequence of single program. So you go on executing these programs in a sequence. Okay, so implement program dependence, terminate the sequence if a program faces abnormal termination. One more thing you have to remember here is, see, program 2 will be executed only if program 1 is executed properly without any interruption. Okay, without any interruption or termination, abnormal termination. If program 1 completes successfully, then only program 2 in the sequence will be executed. Similarly, if program 2 executes successfully without any abnormal termination, then only program 3 will be executed. So if any one of this program in the sequence fails, so then that means the entire sequence is failure. That is what is the meaning. Okay. So if P2 fails to execute properly, after P1 executes properly, if P2 fails to execute properly, then P3 will not be executed. The sequence here will be terminated here itself, and what is the problem? It will be checked. Okay. So next, the third one is the co-executing programs. That is, as I told, concurrent programming. To provide appropriate interfaces between programs, perform in termination of co-executing programs. See, in the third one, what will happen is, so co-executing means there will be at any given point of time more than one program in the memory. So it can be P1, P2, and P3. So they all exist simultaneously in the memory of the computer or the embedded system. Okay. So now what will happen is, see this provide appropriate interface between programs. So interface means, suppose all the three are executing simultaneously. Since they are executing simultaneously, there can be a chance that this program 1 may want to communicate with program 3. Okay, for some purpose it wants to communicate with program 3. So for that we use inter-process communication, IPC techniques. Okay, inter-process communication. So message passing is one of the technique. Okay, mailbox is one of the technique. So inter-process communication means, so whenever the co-executing programs, okay, or concurrent programs want to communicate with other programs that are there in the system, say we use the IPC techniques, inter-process communication techniques. So that will be provided by the OS. So OS will facilitate such communication techniques. Okay. So now we'll come to in detail. So what do you mean by single program? A single program computation consists of execution of a program on a given set of data. So some set of data is there. So on the set of data, you are doing some computation. It can be addition, multiplication, okay, or in terms of DSP, that is digital signal processing. So you may want to enhance the data. Okay, so enhance the data in the sense, suppose that data is an image. Okay, we want to enhance the image, okay, or increase the brightness, increase the contrast, like that. So that is the set of data on which your program is executed. So the program can be either sequential or concurrent. Okay, so the program itself can be sequential or concurrent. If you remember in HDL previous semester, okay, HDL subject, okay, or you can say Verilog HDL, Verilog HDL. Okay, so there were two scenarios wherein see there are different styles of coding. So one was data flow. Okay, so if you remember, one style of coding was data flow. Okay, so in this data flow style of coding, so what would happen is the statements would execute one after the other. Suppose you write XOR, okay, A comma B comma Y, and then OR A comma B comma Z, like that. Okay, so then let's say and A comma B comma C, like that. Okay, so if you write this in data flow, so if you write like this, and usually the keyword would be assign. Okay, so assign like this to some statement. These statements, since they are written in data flow, they will be executed in a sequential manner. So if you remember this is what you mean by sequential. That means one after the other. So in the program itself, one statement after the other, it will be executed. First, this statement is executed, next this one, and last the third one. So it is sequential execution. Okay. So that is what he's talking about here also. Okay. So the program, the single program that you have written, the instructions in that single program, they can be sequential or concurrent. Okay. So if this is the single program that you have written, so here the statements are sequential. So same, if you remember in behavioral, okay, in behavioral, okay, so whatever you write, so it will be usually inside always at. Okay, so whatever the statements you write, okay, so let's say, so x is equal to y plus z, then y is equal to a plus b, okay, and then z is equal to a into b. Suppose this is the statement you write, okay, inside always. So all these statements here, they will execute concurrently. It is concurrent execution. That is, all the three statements start to execute at the same time. Okay, that is what is concurrent execution. So this will also execute, this will also execute, and this will also execute. All the three statements execute simultaneously. That is what is concurrent. So the single program that you write, so the instructions inside the single program can be sequential in nature, or the instructions inside the single program that you have written can be concurrent in nature. So that is what you mean by this. Okay. So a single program is the simplest computational structure. It matches with conventional notion of a program. Okay, so in concurrent programming, different parts of the program can execute concurrently. So that we'll talk about later. Okay. This is what you mean by single program. The next is sequence of single program. So I already gave an example for this. See, each single program in a sequence is initiated by the user through separate command. Okay, so what do you mean by that is, if you take the same example, P1, P2, P3, if there are three programs in the sequence, so first program P1, so in order to execute this or initiate this, so the user has to give a command. Okay, so the command can be double click on P1. That is what you mean by the command. Or if it is a command interface, so like a DOS operating system, you have to type in the command. Okay, to execute each of the programs. However, here a program in sequence could be executed only if previous programs in the sequence executed successfully. So that is what I told. Okay, so P1 executed successfully, so then only you can execute P2. Okay, so to execute P3, so P2 should execute successfully. If P2 terminates abnormally, so then P3 cannot be executed at all. That is what is the statement means. Okay. So to achieve a common goal, the program must explicitly interface their inputs and outputs with other programs in the sequence. That is, see, whatever P1 has computed the result, that can be passed to P2 because they are in a sequence, right? So P2 might want the result of P1. P2 might want the result of P1 so that P2 can continue. It can be, see, the output of program P1 is the input to program P2. Okay, and the output of program P2 can be input to program P3. Okay, so I'll give a simple example for this. So sequence of programs. Okay, sequence of programs. Let's say P1, you have written the program in P1. Okay, so let's say that is x is equal to a plus b. This is the program that you have written in P1. Okay, so P2, the program you have written in P2 is, let's say, y is equal to x plus c. Okay, and the program that you have written in P3, or the program P3 that you have written, it may hold the statement like z is equal to, okay, y plus d. So now you can see all these are interdependent. Okay, so after P1 completes and it produces the output x, then only P2 can be initiated because see, in P2 to compute y, it requires x, which is the output of the previous program. So these are the programs in a sequence. Okay, the x is needed here. So the output of the previous program is the input here, and same is the case for P3. For P3 to execute or complete, it requires the output from P2. That is why if P2 does not complete properly, P3 cannot proceed. Okay, why? Because they are interdependent. It requires y to calculate y plus d. Correct? That is what. That is a sequence of programs. Right? Next, the third one is co-executing programs. So a user initiates co-executing programs by indicating their names in a single command. Okay, so the user can initiate co-executing programs by a single command. So let's say the command is start, okay, P1, P2, P3. So let's say this is the command. So if you type this command in the interface and execute, so press enter, so it will start three co-executing programs, P1, P2, and P3. Okay, so that is what it says. Co-executing semantics. Okay, so semantics means syntax. Okay, require that programs should execute at the same time. That is what I told. All the programs, co-executing programs, they are executing simultaneously, one after the other. So here there is no concept of one after the other. All will execute simultaneously. Okay, and interact with one another during their execution. So there is an interaction between one another. Okay, so always there is an interaction. So that is what I told. I gave an example. Okay, so there can be three programs. Okay, P1, P2, and P3, which are executing simultaneously, which are available in the memory of a computer or embedded system simultaneously, and since they are executing simultaneously, there might be a chance that they can communicate with each other. P1 can communicate with P1, P2 and P3. So P2 can communicate with P1 and P3, okay, and P3 can communicate between P1 and P2. So there may be a chance, okay, and for this we use, as I told, inter-process communication techniques. So there are inter-process communication techniques. We shall study that in the later part of the course. Okay, that is what is there. The OS provides appropriate interface between the co-executing programs. Okay, so appropriate interface means, that is what I told, the IPC techniques. And this IPC technique should be provided by the OS so that the processes can communicate internally between them, since they are executing simultaneously. Okay. This is about program management. The next topic here, the second one, is resource allocation and scheduling. If you remember, we are talking about, okay, so if you have forgotten, we are talking about three principal functions of the OS. So in that first we talked about program management. Okay, so we are done with program management. So next one in the principal, this second one is resource allocation and scheduling, so which is also known as resource management. So in the examination, it can also be asked to explain a brief about resource management by the operating system. So it doesn't mean that it is a different topic. It is same as resource allocation and scheduling. Both are same. Okay. So what will happen? So the topic itself, it says how the resources are allocated and how the scheduling is done. Okay. So we shall talk about these two one after the other. First, the resource allocation function performs binding of one or more resources with a requesting program. Okay, so the term coined is binding or bind. Okay, so suppose you allocate a resource to a program P1. Let's say that the resource that you have allocated is a scanner, okay, scanner device. You allocated it to P1. So then that allocation is known as binding. That means scanner one is bounded to program one. That is what you mean. Okay? That is, it associates resources with the program. Okay, it associates resources with the program. When full stop. So it also deallocates resources from a program and allocates them to other programs. Yeah, so this is also possible. Why? Because suppose program P1 was given the device or the resource S1, that is scanner 1. It doesn't mean that P1 will always be bounded, or sorry, the resource S1 is always bounded to P1 only. No, so this binding can be for, let's say, 2 seconds. It can be time bounded. Okay, so the scanner is available with this program P1 for only 2 seconds. After 2 seconds, let's say P2, this S1, that is scanner 1, will be deallocated from P1 and it will be allocated to P2, or it will be bounded to P2. Okay, so that is what is deallocation. So the allocation can be time based, okay, or priority based. We shall see that later, right? So that is also taken care of by resource allocation. So resources can be divided into system resources and user created resources. There are two types of resources: system resources and user created resources. What do you mean by system resources? CPU, okay, memory, and you can also include virtual memory also. This is system. So CPU, memory, and virtual memory. These are system resources. So user created resources, which can be user created resources. User created can be some IO devices that you connect. Okay, some IO device you connect, some external memory you have connected. External memory you have connected. These come under user create. Okay. So the resource protection function prevents mutual interference between users sharing a set of resources. What do you mean by this? Protection is implemented based on set of constraints like nature of resource or other constraints once specified by the owner. What do you mean by mutual interference? As I told, so P1 and the resource allocated was S1. So the scanner was allocated to P1. Okay. So there is one more resource P2. Let's say, sorry, one more process P2. So P1, P2. So let's say this P2 also wants to use the scanner. Okay, it also wants to use the scanner. So what might happen? So then this P2 may interfere with the usage of S1. Okay, so P2 also wants S1. It also wants to use S1, but S1 is allocated to P1. So P2 may cause an interference in the usage of S1. Why? Because P2 wants S1 and it may cause the interference. So that interference should not be allowed to exist. Okay, so OS. So OS will take care of any mutual interference that may arise whenever resources are being shared. Okay. So there are two popular strategies for resource allocation. Okay, so how do you allocate a resource to a program or a process? So first one is partitioning of resources. Next is allocation from a pool. These are the two approaches. So the first approach, resource partitioning approach, what will happen is, see, the OS decides a priori. So what do you mean by a priori? That is before execution starts itself. Okay. Before execution starts, the OS decides what resources should be allocated to a program. What resources should be allocated to a user program. What is in resource partitioning approach or resource partitioning approach. Okay. So this approach is also called as static allocation. Okay, because allocation is made before the execution of the program begins. So that is what I told. Okay. So remember, resource partitioning approach, what it will do is, it will allocate some of the resources to the program before the execution starts. Okay, before the execution starts, and one more name for this is static allocation. Okay, so this approach is simple, very simple. Why? Because you will allocate some of the resources to the programs. Okay, and this will happen before the execution will begin. Okay, but there is a lacuna here, so it lacks flexibility. First thing is, that leads to problems like wastage of resources that are allocated to a program. Okay, and the resources allocated can remain unused, and next thing is inability of the OS to grant additional resources to the program. Okay, so I'll give an example for this. Okay, so this technique, which is resource partitioning approach, resource partitioning. So it is very similar to getting a plate meals. Okay, getting a plate meals in a restaurant. So you go to a hotel, so you order for a plate meals. Okay, so this usually the plate meals will be served in a round plate like this, correct? So with so many different, let's say, items. Okay, so like this. This can be a curd. Okay, so this can be some sweet. Fine. So this can be, let's say, some palya. Okay, so this can be next one more palya. So this is P1 and P2. So usually there will be two palyas, and let's say there are two puris here. Okay, there are two puris. and let's say there is one one apla. Okay. Okay. So then, and there will be some rice. So this will be, let's say, sambar, and this is rasam. This is what is plate meals normally look like. Right? So, fine. So you order for this, and let's say you pay for this for 100 rupees, somewhat. So now, so this is what is the first approach, resource partitioning. So what will happen is these are the resources: the curd, the sambar, the palyas, sweet, rice. And these are the resources. So as soon as you order for plate meals, okay, so the server, what he will do is he will not ask you what you need. No. Okay, so since you have asked for plate meals, so the server will bring all these items and he will place this on your table. Okay. So now all these resources are allocated to you. Okay, and these resources are allocated to you before execution. That is before you start eating. So they will not ask you whether you want puri, whether you want apla, okay, whether you want some pickle, whether you want rice, which type of rice you want, which type of sambar you want. No, nothing will be asked. So something which is already there in the menu. So they will simply load that into your thali and they will come and place it here. That's okay. So now, so what we can do is, since this is the concept of the resource partitioning, wherein 1 minute. Yeah, so sorry for the disturbance. So yeah, so this is what is resource partitioning or static allocation. So why it is known as static allocation? Because so already they have a menu and they have decided that the plate meals will have these menus, these items, and they will just load them and place them on the table. Okay. So next thing, the problem. So this is a very easy method. Okay. So that is what resource partitioning is. So it is a easy method. Why? Because already the items are ready, so they will just load it onto the plate and they will just place it. Very easy, and this will happen statically. That is before execution, before you start eating. Okay. So once you start eating, disadvantage of this method, resource partitioning. Once you start eating or once you start execution, you cannot demand for any other resource. Okay, you cannot demand for any other resource. You cannot demand that I want one more rice. No. So this is what is allocated, and you have to be self-satisfied within that particular allocated amount. That's all. Okay, you cannot demand for one more curd. No, that is not going to happen. This is the disadvantage of this static allocation method. Okay, you cannot demand for it. You cannot demand extra resources. So that is what is highlighted here. Okay, so the inability of the OS to grant additional resources to the program during execution. So during execution means here during, that is once you start eating, you cannot demand for more because this is plate meals. Okay, hope you are getting the concept. Okay, and one more thing here that might happen. So uh, if you remember here, is here the allocated resources may be unused. The allocated resources may be unused. So what is the concept of that? Is some people, they do not eat curd. They do not eat curd at all. But even though they do not eat, this is already allocated to it. There, okay. So even though they don't make use of curd or this resource, it is already allocated to them. Okay, so it is a waste of resource. Waste of resource. Why? Because that person will not eat curd, or he doesn't want curd, but still it is allocated to him. It is a waste. Okay, this is one more disadvantage. So this is what static allocation will look like. So it is an easy method. Okay, but there are drawbacks. Right. So next is pool-based approach. Pool-based. So what will happen in pool-based? The OS maintains a common pool of resources, and it allocates from this pool whenever a program requests a resource. Okay, so this approach is also known as dynamic allocation. Okay, why? Because allocation takes place during execution of the program. So this pool-based approach or pool-based allocation of resources, it will take place during the execution, not before the execution. It is during the execution. Hence, the OS can allocate, okay, a resource to the program whenever the program requests for it. Whenever the program requests for it. Remember this. Okay. So what is the advantage of this? It avoids wastage. Okay, it avoids wastage of allocated resources, and hence it provides better resource utilization. Okay, so there is no wastage here. So this approach, there is a drawback here, incurs overhead of allocating and deallocating resources individually. So what is this overhead or cost of this here? We will discuss with an example. Okay, so now I'll come to buffet meals. Okay, so I'll take the example of buffet meals for pool-based allocation. Yes. So now, can anyone tell me what will happen in buffet meals? Respond. Anyone can respond. You have been to buffet meals, right? You've been to many functions where buffet meals are served. What is the advantage of buffet meals?
We can eat as much as we want.
Yeah, you can eat how much, whatever you want, and whichever you can say item you want. Okay, so whichever food you want. Okay, there will be no wastage here. So what will happen in buffet meals is, whatever Chirag told is correct. So you will have your plate. You can fill your plate, okay, with whatever dishes you want. Whatever dishes you want. If you don't want curd, don't load it. Okay. So if you want sweet, you can load the sweet onto your thali. Okay. So let's say you want one more sweet, you can load it. Okay. So you want just only one type of palya, so you can load only one palya. Okay. If you don't want rice, don't load rice. If you want 4 puris, take 4 puris. Okay. If you want only rasam, okay, so take only rasam. Okay, so now you can see between the plate meals and the buffet meals. Okay, so what is the advantage here is no wastage. Okay, because whatever the person wants, he himself will go to the table and he will load whatever he wants and how much ever he wants, and he will come back and sit and eat. Getting what I'm saying? So there is no wastage of resource like plate meals. So there is no curd here, which this person doesn't want. Okay, if he doesn't want, he will not load it. That's all. Okay, and one more advantage is, see, during execution or during the eating process, suppose this person, he wants something more. Okay, so let's say he wants a pickle. Okay, this person wants a pickle, who means which he did not bring previously. So he can go to the table and bring the pickle. Okay, so during the execution also, there is a chance of allocation of resources. Okay, so allocation of resources is possible during execution also. This is one more advantage. So both the drawbacks of the previous method, which was resource partitioning approach, wherein there was wastage of resource and there was no chance of allocating the resource during execution. So they are overcome in pool-based allocation or in buffet meals. Okay, but one more thing you have to remember: any method, any approach will have its own drawback. Okay, so here the drawback in pool-based approach is, so it's a overhead. He says there is a overhead. Yeah. So what is this overhead means? See, in a buffet meals, the overhead is, okay. There is a waste of time. What do you mean by waste of time? See, every time this person wants a dish, okay, wants a new dish, he has to go and fetch it from the table. There will be a table here, so wherein the dishes will be there. So every time this person wants some dish, some new dish, he has to go to the table, fetch the dish, and then come back. Okay, so this is the wastage of time. So this is the overhead. That means this pool-based allocation approach, it will be slow. Okay, it will be slow and it will be somewhat complicated compared to resource partitioning approach. One thing is it is slow because it will consume time, and it is complicated because whenever the program demands, whenever the process demands, you have to allocate the resource. Okay, so that will take some overhead. Okay, so the OS will monitor. We will have to monitor more here in this approach. Okay, so hope you got about both the approaches. Okay, so same thing is depicted in this diagram. You can see here. So partition 1, partition 2, partition 3 up to partition 8. So this figure A depicts resource partitioning approach or static allocation. Okay, where you can see. So what is happening here is, suppose if you call this as process 1, P1. This is P2. See, bear with me if the system is slow. So some update is being installed. Okay, in the OS, so that is why it is not responding properly. So again, I cannot blame the OS because it is doing more jobs. Okay, so I cannot scold it. It is doing very many processes in the background. So that is why it is not responding. Right. So it is a resource partitioning approach wherein you can see if there are 3 processes or 3 programs. See, all the 3 programs are assigned with a monitor, a disk. Okay, so this is known as disk, and 1 MB of space. So the P2 will also get a monitor, disk, and some space, 1 MB of memory. So a monitor, a disk, and 1 MB of space. So this is what will happen in resource partitioning or static allocation. So this is plate mills. Okay, so wherein whether you want it or not, it will be given to you. That's all. So process P1, it may not use the disk at all. This disk, it may not use it, but even though it doesn't use it, but it is still allocated. But it will be a waste actually. Okay, like that. Okay, so P2 may not use the monitor at all, but still it is given to P2. It is a waste. Okay, so hope you are getting. So this is resource partition. Second one is, you can see here. So it is pool based. So this is pool based, wherein so there is a resource pool or a resource table. Okay, so with this table, so P1, so you can see process P1. So whatever it wants, it is taking that. Okay, you can see it by in the dotted arrows. So P1 wants the monitor, it will be allocated with the monitor. P1 wants 1 MB of space, it is allocated with 1 MB of space. And P1 wants the disk, it is allocated with the disk. So coming to P2 wants the monitor, it is allocated with the monitor. So P2 does not want the disk. You can see P2 does not want the disk, so they are not allocated to the P2. P2 wants two 1 MB memories, so they are allocated to P2. Getting what in this? So this is buffet. Okay, buffet, and this is dynamic allocation. So during execution, allocation will take place, and whatever the process or program wants, only that is allocated. And this is about the resource allocation and resource allocation, only resource allocation. Okay. Some table will be constructed by the OS, which is known as resource allocation table. So in this table, you can see the status of each of the resource, because this is very important. Okay. See, it is just like booking an online ticket in a bus. Okay, you want to book a ticket in a bus to some place. So you go to the website or the app. So you first give the source and destination, and then the various buses with the timings are listed. You select one particular bus, and as soon as you select that particular bus, so it will show you the layout of the seats, and it will show you which seats are allocated and which seats are free. Okay, so those who have booked these seats, they will come to know like, yes. So the seats which are free are usually in green and the seats which are already booked are in red. Okay, so there it will maintain the list of already booked seats, correct? So that is the same concept here. Resource allocation table also will do the same job. It will maintain all the resources with the resource name. So the first resource is printer 1. What is the class of the resource? Which it is a printer. It will be given a name because here the OS will not understand printer 1. The name printer 1 anta adike gottagadilla. Okay, it will not understand. So whatever the OS will understand, it will be in terms of a code. It will be in terms of 0 and 1. Remember that. Okay. Whatever the OS, whatever the system, whatever the PC, laptop, embedded system, so it will understand only zeros and ones. They will not understand English. Okay, so hence address is given to that printer. So 101 means so the OS will come to know that it is printer 1. And here allocation status, whether it is free or allocated. If it is allocated, to which process it is allocated? It is allocated to P1. Okay, so next printer 2. The class is printer, address is 102. See, no address can be same because if you give two names to say, if you give identical names to two printers or to two resources, so there will be a confusion. You cannot give identical name to more than one particular resource. So there will be a confusion. That is why you can see that the addresses are different. So each resource will have a unique address. Okay. So printer 2 is having the address 102 and it is free. Since it is free, next process demands for a printer. Printer 2 will be allocated for that. Like that. Okay, so this is the resource step. So next, sharing of resources. So resources can be shared in two ways. One is sequential sharing and next is concurrent sharing. Okay, so what do you mean by sequential sharing and concurrent sharing? See, if you remember the example of the bicycle. Okay, so bicycles, so there are two brothers, B1 and B2, and there is a manager here, which are the parents. Okay, the OS. So for the first half of the day, this bicycle is allocated to B1. Okay, and the next half of the day, bicycle is allocated to B2. So what type of resource sharing is this? Can anyone tell me? So the resource we are talking about is bicycle, and how it is being shared here?
Sequentially.
Yes, exactly. So it is sequential sharing. Okay, why? Because so the sharing happens one after the other, not simultaneously. See, both the brothers are not getting the cycle simultaneously. No. Okay. So first B1, the brother B1 will get the cycle. Once he completes his quota of usage, then only B2 will get the bicycle. Okay. That is why it is known as sequential sharing. So one person will get the resource. After him getting the resource and completing the job using that resource, the next person will get the resource. Sequential sharing. Very simple. Very simple. Okay. So next is concurrent sharing. Okay. Concurrent sharing. So what do you mean by this? So again, I'll take the same concept of bicycle sharing only. Okay, again, there are two brothers, B1 and B2. Okay, so again, there is a manager here, which is parents, which is nothing but a OS. Okay, so now in concurrent sharing, what will happen? Both the brothers will get the bicycle simultaneously. Okay, will get the bicycle simultaneously. So can anyone tell me how? This is concurrent sharing. Can anyone tell me how? Yes? Can anyone tell me how? Yes? No idea? See, there are bicycles which can hold two people. Okay, which can seat two people. Yes, have you seen them? Have you seen them?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that is how this is possible. Okay, so types of bicycle, or you can say bicycles with two seats. Yeah, so see here. So this image will show you how this concurrent sharing works. Okay, so this bicycle here, you can see it can seat two persons simultaneously. Two persons simultaneously. Okay, so that is how. Here, so it can seat two persons simultaneously. So that is how the two brothers here can use this bicycle simultaneously. But there is a catch here. So the bicycle should be able to accommodate both the brothers. If that is the case, only concurrent sharing is possible. Yeah, if that is the case, concurrent sharing is possible. So this bicycle here, or the resource here, it should be capable of, okay, it should be capable of, or it should support concurrent sharing. Then only concurrent sharing is allowed. Okay, all the resources do not allow concurrent sharing. So there are only special class of resources which can allow concurrent sharing. Then only concurrent sharing is possible. Okay, that is what sequential and concurrent sharing. When sequential resources allocated exclusively by exclusive use by a program. So that is the first case wherein the bicycle is allocated to only one brother. Okay, when the resource is deallocated, it is marked free in the resource table. Now it can be allocated to another program. Okay, so this is sequential. So once the bicycle is completely used, or the quota is done for the brother one, so it will be allocated to brother two. But in concurrent sharing, what will happen is two or more programs can concurrently use the same resource. So the example for that is, what is the example for that? So the bicycle which has multiple seats like this. Okay. So in such a case, so both two or more programs can use such resource. So like sharing of the data files in the bus timetable. So most other resources cannot be shared concurrently. Okay, as I told, only a few can be done. So the whatever the resource should support concurrent sharing. Then only it is possible. Okay. So if the bicycle has multiple seats only, it is possible. Yeah. So next we'll come to CPU sharing. Okay, CPU sharing. What do you mean by CPU sharing? See, before going to CPU sharing, we'll talk about this. See, the OS deallocates a resource and a program to which is allocated either terminates or makes an explicit request to deallocate. Okay, so that is example. So again, I'll go back to this. So we have allocated, let's say, bicycle to brother one. So for half of the day, so that is 12 hours. So for 12 hours, the bicycle is allocated to B1, brother one. So let's say this B1, once it is allocated, so he will use it for 4 hours. He will use it for 4 hours, and then this bicycle one, sorry, the brother one, so he will request the OS or the parents saying that I have used the bicycle enough. That is 4 years, sorry, 4 hours, sorry, 4 hours. So I have used the bicycle enough. I don't want it further. Okay, so he will request the OS or the parents saying that I don't want to use the bicycle further. You can take it away. Then after the request from brother one, the OS will deallocate the resource. It will deallocate means it will take away the bicycle from B1 and then it will allocate to B2. Since B1 has exclusively made the request. Okay, since B1 has exclusively made the request for deallocation, the OS will do that. This is one case. Or there may be one more case, so which is, see, initially, so the bicycle is agreed to be allocated to B1 for 12 hours. It is agreed and the parents have agreed. But due to some reason, the OS or the parents decide that instead of 12 hours complete allocation to B1, so it is abruptly deallocated. Okay, so let's say after 3 hours of allocation, so still there is 9 hours remaining. But even though there are 9 hours remaining, so the OS or the parents decide 3 hours is sufficient. So it will abruptly take away the resource from B1. Okay, it will abruptly take away the resource from B1 after 3 hours. This sudden deallocation or is also known as forceful deallocation of a resource. Forceful deallocation of a resource is known as resource preemption. This might also happen in some scenarios. Okay, so resource preemption means it is forceful deallocation of a resource from a process. Okay, and this forceful deallocation will be done by the OS. Remember this. Okay, that is what here resource preemption. Sometimes deallocation of resources by force. This is what resource preemption. So now we'll go to CPU sharing, okay, which is also known as CPU sharing is also known as scheduling. So how the CPU share using the concept of scheduling, okay, or scheduling. So what is this CPU? CPU can be shared only in sequential manner. Okay, there is no concurrent sharing. Remember, CPU can always be shared concurrently. Sorry, not concurrently, sequentially. That is one after the other. Sequential sharing. So it can be assigned to only one program at a time. So always remember, CPU sharing is sequential. Okay, so let's say, for example, okay, let's say in your system, in your PC or laptop, there is only one CPU. Okay, usually in any system or laptop, there is only one CPU. Okay, and in the memory, that is in your RAM. Okay, in your RAM. So this is the RAM or the primary memory, working memory, whatever you call. So let's say there are 3 or 4 processes. Okay, in RAM there are 4 processes. So since there are 4 processes, it is concurrent programming. Okay, so that is more than one program is executing or it is existing in the memory. Whenever more than one program is existing in the memory, it is concurrent programming. It is not sequential programming. So there are 4 processes which are already there in the RAM. Okay, so these 4 processes, in order to complete their execution, they require the CPU. Always remember, any process, in order to complete its execution, it requires CPU. Okay, but CPU sharing can only be sequential. Okay, even though the programming is concurrent, but the CPU sharing is sequential. It cannot be concurrent. Then what will happen? So out of the 4 processes here or the program, any one will get the chance to use the CPU. Okay, only any one will get the chance to execute the CPU at any given point of time. So let's say out of these 4, P3 is given the chance. Okay, P3 is given the chance to execute in the CPU. So that means, so CPU is in possession with P3. So it is not under possession of P1, P2 or P4. So that is what is sequential. At any given point of time, CPU can be used only by one program or process. Okay. See, this is depicted in this diagram here. You can see the programs waiting for CPU. So there are n number of programs which are waiting for the CPU. Okay. So there is a software or a piece of code that is written in the OS known as a scheduler. Okay, so scheduler is an algorithm. It's a OS algorithm. Okay, which will decide out of these many programs which are waiting, who will get the chance, who will get the next chance to execute or to use the CPU. That is what is the use of a scheduler. Okay, remember this. Scheduler is a algorithm. Okay, written. So what written so that it will select among all these waiting processes or programs it will select only one process or program which will get the CPU next to execute. Okay, see, the scheduler is selecting one program. Out of these many programs, it is selecting one program and it will be given the CPU for execution. Okay, if that program completes, so the program is complete. Okay, but if that program does not complete, okay, it will be again moved back to the list of waiting programs. See why it is moved back, or when it is moved back, whenever it is preempted. So just now we talked about preemption. What is preemption? Forceful deallocation of a resource. Here, let's say this is P1, this is P2, and this is P3. So out of these three, P3 will get the chance. So scheduler will select P3 and it will give the chance P3 to use the CPU. So P3 is using the CPU. Okay. So this usage will be usually it can be it can employ many methods. So one of the methods is time sharing. So the CPU is time shared. What do you mean by that is, whenever you allocate a process with the CPU, so it is time shared. So let's say P3 is allocated to use the CPU for 2 seconds, only 2 seconds. So P3 can use the CPU for 2 seconds. So after 2 seconds, if P3 is not completed, if it is not completed, it will be moved back, or it will be preempted. Preempted means forceful deallocation of the CPU will happen. So the CPU will be forcefully taken away from the process P3, and hence P3, which is not yet completed, it will be moved back to the list of waiting programs, because P3 is not yet completed. It was forcefully removed from the CPU. So hence it is moved back. Okay, getting what I'm telling? So this is how the scheduling will take place. So modern CPUs have the capability of execute program instructions at a very high rate. So it is possible for a OS to interleave the execution. See, that is what I told you. A scheduler, which is a OS routine or an algorithm that performs scheduling, maintains a list of program waiting to execute on the CPU and selects any one program for execution. That is what is a scheduler. It is a OS routine or a algorithm which is written, which will maintain the list of all the programs that are waiting to use the CPU, and it will select only one among them. Okay, remember this. In operating systems that provide fair service to all programs, don't worry about this. What is that? Once the OS allocates the CPU to a process, it will also take away the CPU from a program after it has executed for a specified period of time. So that is what I told. Once P3 is given the CPU, it will be given 2 seconds of time to use the CPU. So once that 2 seconds are completed, what will happen? The OS will take away the CPU from the process, and it will give one more program to use the CPU. So this process is known as preemption. That is what I told. Forceful deallocation of a resource. So here the resource is CPU. So a program that loses CPU because of preemption is put back into the list of programs waiting for the CPU. Why this will happen? Why? Because the program has not yet completed execution. Okay, it was executing in the CPU, but because the time given to it was over, that is why the CPU was taken away from it. So hence the program, it still needs CPU to complete its execution. So hence it has not yet completed. So it will be moved back to the list of programs which are still waiting to get the CPU, so that it will get its chance once again to use the CPU and then complete itself. Okay. So this is what will happen, and this is what is the concept. Okay. This is CPU sharing, which is also known as scheduling. So in the next session, we'll talk about memory sharing.